They didn't choose you by accident. They chose you because you glowed, because your light made their darkness bearable. But instead of learning to shine beside you, they tried to steal your fire. They didn't choose you by accident. They chose you because you glowed, because there was something radiant about the way you saw the world, the way you loved without calculation, the way you believed that goodness could still exist in people. You carried an energy that drew others in. Your warmth, your empathy, your ability to make someone feel seen, that's what caught their attention. The narcissist noticed it immediately. They could sense it before you even said a word. You were the type of person who listens deeply, who feels deeply, who gives without keeping score. And that's precisely why they moved toward you. They needed that energy. They needed someone who could give what they couldn't generate within themselves. The narcissist operates from emptiness. Behind the confidence, behind the charm, there's a hollow place that terrifies them. They can't fill it with honesty or connection because those things require vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like death to them. So they look for someone who can supply what they lack: validation, admiration, a sense of identity. You became that supply. They didn't want you for who you are in your essence. They wanted what being around you made them feel about themselves. They wanted to stand beside your light and pretend it was theirs. And in the beginning, it feels like magic. They mirror you perfectly. Every word, every gesture feels like alignment. They study your desires, your values, your wounds, and then they reflect them back as if you've finally found someone who understands. You think, this person gets me, but what they really get is how to read you. They understand what you crave, and they feed it to you in doses just large enough to make you believe this connection is special. You start to trust them. You start to invest. You open up your heart, and in doing so, you hand over the map to your emotional world. The narcissist knows exactly what to do with that map. They begin by building you up, making you feel like you're extraordinary, not because they actually believe it, but because it keeps you giving. They'll say all the right things, they'll mirror your ideals, they'll match your rhythm, and for a while it feels like fate. But slowly, subtly, the shift begins. They start to withdraw their warmth, offer silent treatments, criticize in ways that make you doubt yourself. The person who once made you feel invincible now makes you question your worth. And that's the moment they gain control. You see, the narcissist thrives on contrast. The higher they lift you, the harder they can drop you. They create the illusion of paradise so that when they remove it, you'll do anything to get it back. That's how they secure their power, by making you chase the version of them that never really existed. You become addicted to the cycle of hope and confusion, trying to return to what once felt real. But it wasn't real. It was a performance designed to feed their ego and silence your instincts. What's most tragic is that your goodness, your empathy, your willingness to see the best in others becomes the weapon they use against you. They manipulate your compassion, convincing you that if you just love harder, they'll change, that if you're patient enough, you'll bring back the person you first met. But that person was a mask. You were never dealing with someone who wanted love. You were dealing with someone who wanted control. And they chose you not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to sustain their chaos. They sensed your endurance, your loyalty, your emotional depth, and they wanted to consume it. They wanted to own it, to drain it, to wear it like armor for themselves. They mirror you because they have nothing real to offer. The narcissist survives by imitation. They watch you, study your expressions, your tone, your values, and they shape-shift into what you most want to see. It's not love, it's strategy. They know that if they can become your reflection, you'll fall for the version of yourself they're presenting. It's clever, almost sinister, how they make you believe you've finally found someone who understands you. Every interest you mention, they share. Every belief you express, they affirm. Every pain you reveal, they claim to have felt too. They build a counterfeit connection out of fragments of your identity. And because it feels so familiar, so natural, you lower your guard. You mistake imitation for intimacy. At first, it feels like alignment on a soul level. You think, finally, someone who gets it. You feel seen, validated, recognized in a way you've been craving for years. But what you don't realize is that what they're seeing isn't you, it's your usefulness. They're not connecting, they're collecting. Every secret, every vulnerability you share becomes a tool they can later use to control or disarm you, and you won't notice it at first. Because they give before they take. They mirror before they manipulate. Their presence begins to shape your perception of yourself. You start to depend on their approval because they've positioned themselves as the ultimate source of validation. They give you attention that feels intoxicating, but it's calculated. They're building an emotional debt you'll spend the rest of the relationship trying to repay. When they withdraw it, the silence is deafening. You'll do anything to restore the connection, to bring back the person you thought you met. That's how the hook deepens, not through cruelty at first, but through confusion. Eventually the mask starts to crack. You'll see glimpses of coldness, arrogance, manipulation. You'll catch inconsistencies in their stories, contradictions in their behavior. You'll start to question them gently at first, then with more conviction, and that's when they turn it back on you. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're too sensitive, too needy, too dramatic. You'll apologize for things you didn't do just to calm the storm. And each time you do, you lose a little more of yourself. That's the psychological erosion they depend on. By mirroring you, they built trust. By gaslighting you, they maintain control. The cycle repeats until you no longer recognize your own reflection. You'll find yourself trying to become the person you were at the beginning, strong, confident, full of light, but you'll be doing it inside their cage. They designed it that way. They want you to chase the illusion they created because it keeps you bound to their narrative. And while you search for the version of them that made you feel alive, they feed off the version of you that now feels broken. You start to notice the cracks when the warmth fades, when the person who once adored you begins to treat you like an inconvenience. It's subtle at first, a dismissive comment, a cold glance, a sigh that tells you your presence no longer feels welcome. You wonder what changed. You replay conversations in your head, searching for something you said or did wrong. That's the trap. The narcissist doesn't explain, doesn't reassure, doesn't communicate. They withdraw, and that silence becomes punishment. You find yourself trying to earn back the closeness that once came so easily, but it's not coming back. Not because you failed, but because this is the next phase of their control. The love bombing stage turns into devaluation. Everything they once praised, they now criticize. The qualities that drew them to you become the very things they use to tear you down. Your sensitivity becomes overreacting. Your kindness becomes weakness. Your independence becomes selfishness. They rewrite the meaning of your identity right in front of you, and you start to internalize it. You begin to believe that maybe they're right, maybe you are the problem. That's how they gain power, by distorting your self-image until you can no longer trust your own perception of reality. The emotional abuse is not always loud. It's not always shouting or insults. Often, it's silence. It's indifference. It's that cold detachment that makes you question whether they ever cared at all. You find yourself apologizing more, trying harder, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their disapproval. But no matter what you do, it's never enough. They keep moving the goalposts, changing the rules, rewriting what's acceptable. And you chase their approval like it's oxygen, because somewhere inside you still remember the version of them who made you feel so deeply loved. That's the cruelest part. They condition you to crave the very person who's hurting you. You become addicted to the cycle of reward and withdrawal. When they finally give you a small glimpse of affection again, it feels euphoric. You think you're healing the relationship, but what's really happening is reinforcement. They're training you to associate pain with love, chaos with passion, control with connection. It's psychological conditioning disguised as romance. And even when you start to see the pattern, it's hard to break free, because they've intertwined your sense of worth with their approval. You don't want to believe that the person who made you feel so alive could also be the one destroying you. So you rationalize, you minimize, you tell yourself they're just going through something. You hold on to the idea that if you just stay patient, if you love them enough, the good version of them will return. But it never does, because that version never existed. It was a mask designed to disarm you. And once you were fully invested, they replaced it with their true self, cold, entitled, and incapable of genuine empathy. You start to turn inward because that's what they've trained you to do. Every time something goes wrong, your first instinct isn't to question them, it's to question yourself. You analyze your tone, your words, your reactions. You wonder if you're being too demanding, too emotional, too unreasonable. That self-doubt becomes the narcissist's greatest weapon. They don't even need to convince you that you're wrong anymore because you've already started to police yourself. You've internalized their criticism to the point that it echoes in your own mind. You replay arguments, not to find truth, but to find fault in yourself. That's how deeply they've embedded themselves into your thinking. You tell yourself they're just misunderstood, that maybe they're distant because they're stressed, or that maybe if you communicate better, things will go back to how they were. You start giving them excuses they don't even ask for. You defend them to others. You isolate yourself because you don't want anyone to see how far you've fallen into confusion. You call it love, but what it really is survival. You're trying to manage their moods, avoid conflict, keep the peace. You become small to keep the relationship intact. You silence your needs because somewhere inside you've been conditioned to believe that expressing them is selfish. This is where the manipulation deepens. The narcissist knows you've begun to doubt yourself, so they use it to tighten their grip. When you express hurt, they say you're overreacting. When you ask for clarity, they accuse you of causing drama. When you pull away, they suddenly act kind again, just enough to keep you hooked. It's a push and pull dynamic that leaves you emotionally exhausted, always trying to read between the lines, always trying to anticipate the next shift. You live in a state of psychological tension, hopeful one moment, broken the next. The confusion becomes so overwhelming that you start to crave their approval more than peace. You just want the pain to stop, so you agree to their version of reality. You tell yourself it's easier that way. You stop trusting your own perception because every time you tried to stand up for yourself, they turned it around and made you feel guilty for it. And soon, you start apologizing for things you didn't do. You start changing your behavior not to improve the relationship, but to avoid punishment. You lose track of who you were before them, because every day is about managing how they see you. This is the emotional cage they build. It doesn't need walls or locks because it's made of your own guilt, your own hope, your own need to be understood. You stay because you believe there's still a chance to fix it, still a way to make them see the real you. But they never will, because they don't want to. They don't see you as a partner, they see you as a mirror. And once you stop reflecting the image they need, they begin to erase you piece by piece. Your capacity to love deeply becomes the very thing that saves you, but only after it breaks you open. When the narcissist discards you, when they turn cold, when they replace you as if you never existed, the shock hits harder than any physical blow could. You sit there trying to make sense of how someone who once looked at you with such warmth could now look through you as if you're invisible. The mind refuses to accept it at first. You search for closure, for answers, for anything that explains the cruelty. But closure from a narcissist never comes, because their goal was never understanding, it was dominance. Their silence is not absence, it's control. It's their way of saying, you don't matter unless I decide you do. And for a while, you believe them. The heartbreak that follows isn't just from losing them, it's from losing yourself. You grieve the person you were before they entered your life. You grieve the certainty, the trust, the peace you used to feel. Every moment of kindness they showed you replays in your mind like a ghost, keeping you stuck between memory and reality. But as the fog begins to lift, you start to see the truth for what it was, manipulation dressed as love. And though it's painful, that realization is the beginning of freedom. You start to understand that their choice of you wasn't random. They chose you because your empathy made you easy to open and hard to destroy. They chose you because you were the kind of person who keeps showing up, even when hurt. They knew you'd fight for the relationship long after they'd stopped fighting for you. But what they never accounted for is that once the illusion breaks, your healing begins to build something they can't touch: awareness. You start to see patterns you never saw before. You recognize how your compassion was exploited, how your boundaries were eroded, how your worth was hidden beneath their narrative. Slowly, you begin to reclaim it. You stop apologizing for existing, for feeling too much, for wanting more. You begin to understand that your light was never the problem. It was their darkness that couldn't coexist with it. Healing doesn't come quickly. It comes in fragments, through moments of clarity, through tears that cleanse rather than weaken, through realizations that sting but set you free. And as you rise from the wreckage, you notice something powerful. The same heart they tried to break still beats with courage. The same empathy they mocked still exists, but now it's wiser. You no longer hand it over freely to those who haven't earned it. You no longer mistake chaos for connection or silence for peace. You understand now that love isn't about saving someone else, it's about not losing yourself in the process. And that understanding transforms the pain into strength, the confusion into wisdom, and the ending into the beginning of your becoming.